new digital pathways. It's about multi-platform marketing. And if you don't mind starting by introducing yourself and saying what you think the biggest challenge is when it comes to multi-platform marketing.
I would say in terms of the biggest challenges of multi-platform marketing, and I think it goes with the theme of this show, is defining what that means for you specifically as whatever company you come from and as a marketer, and then thinking about what the implications are. Because it seems like it could be a big candy store to play in, but there are, to the point of the topic, perils that may come with it.
Okay.
From a multi-platform perspective, I would say really the biggest challenge for marketers is truly understanding the customer journey, how they interact in each level of the purchase decision and purchase funnel. And from a multi-screen perspective, really what we've seen is people use each screen and interact differently. And it's just having that true knowledge of the overall customer path to make sure that you're optimizing your messages accordingly.
I think that the biggest challenge is actually cultural. People execute on multi-platform or multi-device in two primary ways. One is on the medium and the format, how I want to create the experience, and so forth. And then you have to tie it all back, the customer journey, with measurement. But it's a generation of folks who are kind of what I call born offline. I was born offline, and that's the world that I grew up in. A lot of my colleagues, I'm a little old at Facebook. A lot of my colleagues, most of my colleagues were born digital. They grew up with the web. The new generation of folks who have adopted this communication technology are born mobile. And it's difficult for us as leaders to think about the experiences that they're going to do. And if you harken back to like television, when the shift happened from radio to television, this transformation that we just saw with devices and multi-platforms is the biggest mass communication shift that we've seen since that time. And so if you think about how brave some of the early television pioneers had to be, Procter & Gamble with the invention of the soap opera, I think it's really hard in the DNA of most companies to get their head around what it means to live in this new world, because everything is changing.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to pick up on the measurement point, so being able to link what happens offline versus online. Facebook, I believe, would say that they're actually in the process of solving that problem, where because we have digital identities that are linked to people on different devices, we're able to know what happens and we're getting stored data. Can I start with you, Dave, maybe then? How close are we to solving this dilemma of linking offline purchases or behavior with online activity?
From a technological standpoint, it's for the most part solved. Right? There are no technological barriers preventing anybody from connecting point of sale, from connecting CRM through the multi-screen digital experience. It's at the very beginning of that cultural process that I was talking about for how people think about what is then possible because you can connect all this through the customer journey, actual real sales impact. That things can have. A lot of us grew up in a world where we used kind of proxies, or we used methodologies to kind of get the general gist of what our marketing was doing, and we can begin to tie that back in a much more deterministic way today.
How reliable is it, Greg?
Yeah, I think that, that's very much right, and there's been a lot of conversation today around measurement and analytics, and I think while it's certainly challenging and hard, it's there. I mean, it really is solved much more than I think is widely known. So, what we do from a Nielsen perspective is take the watch data, right? What people see, total audience, content and ads across platform, and intersect that with what people buy, looking at the sales and purchase data, and then combining that together allows the ability to optimize ads in flight and real time, and to be able to measure. So there's some tremendous capabilities to really know what's happening, to reduce waste, increase ROI, and really get a lot more out of your advertising. So I think it's pretty rich.
Okay, so I guess being a provoker, I don't understand how we can say that this is solved. Like, people do not trust ratings. They find the measurement and the data accuracy really debilitatingly ineffective often. So how can we say that that we have the capabilities to do this when I feel like we're still in the kind of the nucleus stage of it with trying to figure out accuracy when it comes to data that we're even able to track, let alone the non-trackable data? Can I throw it back to one of you?
Sure. I'll start, and
Sure.
You can pick it up. The statement that you made is true if you're still using the technology that we built over the past decade to run and look at and measure the effectiveness of your digital and then trying to bridge that, right? Largely, that's based on, this is a fairly sophisticated room, so that's largely based on cookie technology that has all kinds of flaws that people figured out in the analysis that they were doing. Earlier in the previous panel, somebody mentioned marketing is really all about people. The minute the shift to cross-screen forced that join key to be a person, we can now do things and test the accuracy and validate how accurate those things are. And there's a lot of work being done that I'll let you comment on about getting that accuracy right and understanding when you do measuring how much or how accurate it is, and then deciding which data sets that you want to use based on its fidelity.
But in terms of the organizations that are able to collect that data and merge the desktop with the mobile device, I can count them on my hand, right? Like, one, there's not very many organizations that possess that power to sync up the identities across devices. Facebook would be one, where you have to log in and authenticate. But
you can use the platforms provided by folks like Nielsen, provided by folks like Facebook, and there are other companies bringing these platforms to the forefront so that any company can use those technologies to do this kind of analysis. I think the problem that you're pointing out is that we're at the very next step in the evolution of this measurement process, and it's very, very early on where we can actually quantify the accuracy of it to build on it. And that's the cultural problem that I was talking about inside of companies. It's just the beginning of adoption right now, and most of the folks who are doing it are fairly forward thinkers.
Okay. Greg, I'd like to ask you about it. I'd like to ask particularly with video, where there's much more of an emphasis of having, for television advertisements, content that's related. Where are we at with being able to track what's seen online and on other devices besides the television?
Yep, sure. No, it's a great question. And talking about it in the terms of video is the right way. It's how we talk about it internally, right? We don't talk about television programs and programs for the web. It really is video, and what we're seeing is media fragmentation is accelerating. It's going to continue to do so, but media consumption is going up. And what we've seen overall is that on average, consumers are consuming 52 hours a week of media, which is a tremendous amount.
Is some of that simultaneously?
What we're from a simultaneous screen perspective, we're seeing that over 80% of folks have used their phone and their tablet while they're watching television. So certainly that multi-screen usage piece is certainly happening. But from a measurement perspective, it could be very easy to say it's difficult, it's hard. What I'm really saying to everybody here is it isn't easy, but there's a lot more capabilities out there than you may realize, and to really push to get the data and analytics that you need. From a Nielsen perspective, to answer your first question, we are maniacally focused on measuring the total audience, all ads, all content, no matter how they're served, linear or in dynamic fashion, across all screens. And we're really excited where we're at in that process.
Missy, can I ask you about privacy issues? So it's something that actually hasn't come up a tremendous amount at the conference today, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to pair accuracy with potential distance and privacy concerns.
Absolutely, and I'd actually like to add on to that security concerns as well, which might be a bit of a provocative thought that marketers don't think about, and I think both security and privacy, coming from being a network services provider, is core of what we do in providing cybersecurity services. And the fact that we have so many platforms and screens right now, Internet of Things has been talked a lot about today, as well as mobile to traditional devices, that is opening the attack surface up in just actually logarithmic ways. In fact, we're going to be having to move from the current IP system because we don't have enough IP addresses to deal with all of these devices that are out there. And so as marketers, we have to think about security and privacy hand in hand. We need to think about how we don't get tempted by this candy store that I mentioned up front. As a B2B marketer, our targeting is actually probably a lot easier than in other cases because we know that we're going after enterprise companies that look like X, Y, and Z. And so having access to knowing exactly what those IP addresses are is not that hard to do. But there are two issues. One, we have the risk of shooting ourselves in the foot and having customers opt out from us in a nuclear fashion, which means that we've lost them forever if we start doing the email game.
But are businesses as sensitive to privacy concerns as you think the general populace is?
They are. Think about yourselves in your daily lives. I mean, I personally delete 20 emails every morning, the first thing when I get up. And all of them are from companies who want to do business with me as a marketer. So, we're all humans in that way. The other thing that is very real, and Europe is really leading the way, last week in the Wall Street Journal, it was reported that there is additional legislation pending around privacy laws. Germany has always been famous for this in terms of protecting customer data. But
and the ramifications huge. They're proposing 5% of global revenues for a data breach, which is
exactly.
Large.
And they're looking right now to spread out 28 different countries in the EU to all subscribe to the same privacy laws. And any of us who are global marketers, that's going to impact our business tremendously.
In terms of kind of top 3 nightmare scenarios at Facebook, where does security come in? And is it? I assume it's in the top 3, but is it?
Probably 1, 2, and 3.
Can you tell us about your nightmares?
Fortunately, we have one of the foremost security teams on the planet who have nightmares about it all night, and they spend their waking nights thinking about that and protecting that. From my personal business standpoint, it's really more, I spend my time thinking a lot more about the privacy aspect of the security as opposed to the lockdown, because I have I'm so fortunate to have that team. From a privacy standpoint, I spend my time thinking about 2 things. One is people using and doing things in ways that are just bad for the industry. There's a lot of, in fact, we were talking in the hallway earlier, there's a lot of companies out there doing things that consumers just really have no idea and no understanding and no control over. And the second one is around kind of the education process. We've labeled privacy as this tax, as this negative thing that comes around all the time. Then we have to, we have to update our various policies, or we have to make something more transparent. I think of that as empowerment. Right? If we as marketers, if we as companies are more transparent with what it is that we do, if we provide more controls for what it is that we do with our customer data, that empowers us to use it. And the customer knows that, and they give us that power to do it. And what they ask is really simple. Just be simple and transparent. So I spend a lot of time making sure that the partners that we work with are transparent around that, and then building into our products the controls so that you can have people-based controls to go with the people-based market.
And what's one innovation that you guys have achieved in that space?
One of the ones I think we're most proud of at Facebook is that when you opt out of various targeting buckets, it's already cross-device. It doesn't selectively just say, oh no, not on this device. When you move to the next one, those things pass along. And so we're really keeping the theme of that who you are as a person from thing to thing. And I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud of.
Got it. We talked about video briefly from a measurement standpoint. I'm interested from kind of an infrastructure standpoint. We see so much, it's like 70% of peak traffic is video. We see so many more marketers interested in investing in video advertising. Is the infrastructure there to support it, and do we risk a meltdown?
We definitely risk a meltdown. In fact, our CEO who spoke at the World Economic Forum earlier in January about the Internet of Things. And I thought what he said was fascinating, which is that the emergence of this and all of the content that can go out is terrifying and thrilling all at the same time, because the bandwidth needs are going to be incredible as it relates to that.
And so what's the scenario that would require a meltdown, do you think? Looking just at America, what's our capacity?
So again, as an industry, we've got to get together to move to a new IP system, which is IPv6, so that there are enough IP addresses to actually handle this volume. And then I think the other thing, and this kind of goes back to just, you're talking about actual disciplines that you've put in place to, control what goes where, when, so that the customer has that control themselves. But I think as marketers, this digital piece is very tempting. We have to put a little discipline to ourselves as well and go back to 101 basics to consider letting customers choose when they interact with us, which I think is a long way of saying that will help us understand what the demand really is versus forcing it out there and having it implode.
Okay. One of the things that fascinates me is data in this space, and it's come up again and again and again. First-party data has proven already to be gold. Third-party data is possibly bronze, but people disagree about how valuable it is. And so I'm really curious. Nielsen bought Exalate, third-party data provider, yesterday, I think.
Right, yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what the value proposition is for third-party data providers and how marketers should be thinking about third-party data right now?
Yeah, sure. And the Exalate acquisition was really around bringing in that programmatic data as the world moves towards that. But the idea, again, of having that marketing efficiency, the better data that you have and leveraging that first-party data will really make sure that your digital advertising resonates, right? So research we've done has shown that only 59% of digital impressions reach their target audience. That's a lot of waste.
Especially for a medium that promises to be more accurate than mass media, right?
Right, and it goes back to the John Wanamaker quote from 100 years ago, right? Half my advertising's wasted. I just don't know which half. They were talking about it 100 years ago, and we're still talking about it now. So leveraging that first-party data, again, that individual level data, and matching it with purchase behavior, really can solve a lot of the issues and drive incredible efficiencies from a marketing and advertising perspective.
Okay. I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience, and this is really an opportunity to share. If there are things that are on your mind, this is an opportunity to share kind of best practices or stories about what's frustrating you, and you can also ask our panelists, but would love to hear from you guys what the pressing concerns are. Yes?
So this is all exciting when you think about multi-platform marketing, but what should a CMO do if your organization is entrenched in the spend that they put into cookies and the traditional legacy model, and what do they need to do first to get device agnostic?
Sure. We call this the damned if you do, damned if you don't CMO. The consumer is on mobile devices, and the consumption on that is growing at a rate that outpaces everything. So if you're not on mobile, you're stuck. And if you've invested in a whole bunch of technologies over the past 10 years, then that's a giant blank spot. So it's either you're not where your consumer is, or you, by and large, have a black hole in your measurement. That's the scenario that lots of them are facing. And so the very first thing that, the very first piece of advice that we give to folks is to kind of think about, go back to basics, and think about the strategy of the person that you're marketing to. Go back to basics on what that segmentation is, and then begin to work forward from there. And don't repeat the sins of the past. Don't go all in on any one tactic. Right? Unify it at a measurement level in a way that you know is going to be extensible and flexible for what we know is going to become a more complicated, not less complicated, multi-dimensional world.
Can you explain that really fast? So if you're not going to go in at one tack in this post-cookie world, what do you suggest?
Yeah. So the first thing that we suggest is, again, back to principles. Go to people-based marketing. Leverage the things that you know and that you understand. Your CRM files. Who are your existing customers? Use them as the basis for how you're going to start to look at your success. Start to look at actual ties to sales on things that feel real and believable. So look for measurement platforms that are based on actual people that are inherently built on both the digital and an offline world, as opposed to something that is kind of built like on just a cookie that isn't extensible anywhere else. Go look through that, and then go where the consumer is going, and by and large, that's app-based. And as you get into that, what you will find are the patterns is a lot of personalization, and you'll quickly go down a path and be looking at native very, very quickly.
Craig,
I would just add to that. I think it's also look at which step into multi-platforms makes sense for your business. So for us as a B2B marketer, an app is important, but it's not important to do a transaction. You know, we have tremendously long sales cycles, and customers invest, you know, a lot of recurring monthly cost with us. However, for us, it makes total sense to create an app to help with the customer experience. Upsell, cross-sell is a huge part of our business. We have many customers who might have one product with us. And so if I have an app, which we created a prototype of last year and did a test, and that we're now rolling out in a more sophisticated manner for customers to interact with CSRs, to customers to interact with their account rep, that is a way that next step made sense for level 3. So it's kind of the, you know, don't just do it because everybody's doing it. Look at the basics of what makes sense for your business.
Craig, did you?
Yeah, to add, and you said something I think which is very true, which is you can go nuts chasing the technology. It's constantly going to be changing. Sticking to the basic fundamentals of marketing at all time is key. So again, going to the advertising piece, if that's what you're focused on, the idea of reaching your target audience and not having too much duplicated reach, you know, does not change no matter what the technology is. It's leveraging that technology, not being afraid to embrace it and to use it, and really, again, going to that point of understanding how your customers are moving through the whole purchase cycle from exploration, you know, to that actual purchase, and then using the different screens and the different mediums accordingly to get the message out. So you know, that true understanding of what's going on, sticking to the basics, no matter what happens technology-wise, really is the best advice I could give.
Okay.
Keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Ask people the methodologies under the foundation of all this is measurement, right? That's the foundational thing that you always start with on the basis of how am I going to know if I'm doing well or not, right? So keep it simple. Ask about the methodologies of the vendors that you're considering. And if it sounds like a whole bunch of technical hocus pocus, it probably is.
That's right. Yeah, pushing your
Well, all
your
of ad tech sounds like technical hocus pocus. The entire industry is.
But that's not. But it's not. But there's things you really can do, right? I mean, using that first-party user registration data, having frequency capping, right? Cross-device ID, privacy first. But I mean, there are things that can be done, and it really is a matter of you know, pushing your partners to make sure that they're explaining it clearly to you and that you truly understand it. And if they can't, you know, you might want to look elsewhere. It's solvable. It's hard, but it's solvable.
I think you made kind of a funny comment, but it's worth pressing on because it's very real. And the reality is that there's truth under that. There is a lot of hocus pocus. There's a whole lot of bogus stuff going on where people misrepresent exactly what's happening.
Well, you see it with some of the stocks of some of the ad tech companies that talk about artificial intelligence and investors do not understand the business. Someone doesn't understand the business, either the business or the investors. And so the stock is going like this and then really just down. But in the reporting I've done, I mean, it's amazing how many conversations I've had where people use 3-letter acronyms as every single word in that sentence, and then period. So,
Well, and getting some sense of standards is also important. I mean, I know I'm dealing with this just in my world right now, in terms of our digital marketing efforts and our reporting and our analytics. How do different systems talk to each other? If I create secure microsites for customers to come to, does that have back-end implications on my marketing automation tools and my databases and my analytics tools? And it becomes so complicated that it feels like that I should just go back to paper. But I know that's not the right answer, but that's, I think that's a challenge for marketing technology.
Do you feel, because we were talking earlier about how marketing is going through an identity crisis, I'm really interested because we haven't talked a lot about B2B marketing. Do you feel like B2B marketing is in exactly the same place as marketing more generally and consumer-facing marketing?
I think that B2B marketers have been guilty, and I can say that we probably have been as well, as looking at it as a way to just go direct to that one-on-one conversation and try to set up a meeting and close a deal because I've got an email address. And I think the difference is actually the same rules apply, and that your brand counts. You've got to invest in awareness. You've got to invest in content. I heard that a lot, I think, at the lunch session today, and let customers self-select to interact with you. And we have to be patient, because what is different is that we don't have the point-in-time solutions to, ping you with social media about 50% off burritos and close a deal in the next 5 minutes. So we've got to have discipline around that.
Let's take another question from the audience, right there.
In the spirit of measurement, so attribution has been something that has kept me up a lot at night. And specifically in the industry I'm in now, we do a lot of stuff on digital facing. The customer life cycle hits a lot of different touch points throughout that life cycle. Yeah. We actually pay per lease, pay per call in some of those instances. And what we found is in this sector specifically, there's no standard as, hey, first point of contact is what you pay on, or the last point of contact is what you pay on. Have you all faced any kind of attribution breakthroughs? And do
you mind sharing where you're from?
Oh, sure, sorry. Essex Property Trust, multifamily developer.
Thank you.
The biggest breakthrough, personally, that I've experienced in the attribution, in particular the multi-touch attribution problem, which is, I think, more specifically what you're talking about, is that it's a really good tool to assess price. It's actually not a great tool to assess impact. That's kind of the biggest breakthrough. All the research that we've done basically says it's a really good pricing tool. If you're looking for how to generate new sales, you're better off using lift methodologies that isolate all the variables and take out and look at exposed and unexposed for where you're likely to get lift, and then go find exclusive new reach to build on that. That's a better way to generate new incremental sales. But multi-touch attribution is a very good way to look at how you're going to negotiate price.
Yeah, I would say I'm a big fan of it for really understanding the customer through the journey. Combining that with marketing mix modeling, I think, is a very powerful combination.
Okay. Do you have a question? Go ahead.
What do you think of price variance by platform?
That's really wide. Price variance on what?
Like on a product. So let's say I'm buying something on my mobile phone, versus I'm buying something on my laptop versus I'm buying in person. So I see that on apps a lot,
Yep.
where if I go and buy a food item at the store, it's X dollars, but the online menu, if I order for delivery, is different. Or like,
Or they show you a different price per flight if you're shopping on an iPhone versus
Exactly.
a different type
Yeah.
of smartphone.
yeah.
So I think that's a good example of how the phone is changing every single aspect of our lives. You're watching marketers start to develop pricing strategies and test them across them. We do know that there's a ton of research and interaction that actually happens on the device, and almost half of those end up converting on a desktop. So if you're not connecting the two to look at the impact, then you're kind of missing 50% of the equation. So we know that happens, and so from our standpoint, I don't know everybody's business the way that they know their business. So what we're trying to do is to give them the platform base to connect those two things so they can put multiple pricing strategies into market and understand how people are reacting to them. That's our approach to it.
Mm.
Yeah. It's broad, right, because it does depend on industry. I would say start with the customer and what do they expect. I would be okay with that if it's airline or hotel reservations, but for many things, I wouldn't. And again, understanding that customer journey, right? We know often the journey starts with the phone and starts with search, and then using the computer and your tablet to do some more research and continue down the path. So I think it really does depend by industry, but I would just say, would your customer be okay with it?
And I would assume that most consumers, if they knew about it, wouldn't be terribly enthusiastic about it. So basically, isn't what you're saying, go for it as long as you can until you get caught?
No, it's absolutely, it is all about transparency and doing the right thing for your customer and not playing games to try to get to get a few bucks. That's really playing the short game. Customer first, complete transparency will always win in the end.
So basically shift people to the platform potentially where the price would be lower? Like advertise, because there's not much transparency if you're offering a lower price on mobile versus.
Yeah, I think it depends on the industry, and again, airline, I would not be surprised, but most things I would, and I would be disappointed, and I wouldn't do it. Again,
Right.
I don't know everybody's business and industry, so it's a little bit of a hard question to answer. But if I wouldn't do anything that would disappoint my customer.
Yeah.
That if they called me and called me out on it, I would be embarrassed. Do the right thing. Play the long game.
Okay. Yes.
I want to talk maybe for a second about creative. So first-party data is important. Moving from platform to platform is important. Getting opt-ins is important. This is all sort of ends up being foundational for marketers today. But so I see a lot of people working to move a customer forward in their buying journey, but the creative execution there is all over the map. Like Jeff Bridges does a Squarespace commercial in the Super Bowl, and like who goes to that website? Like who knows? I don't know. I don't know if that was successful or not, but how well did that hit? Mass market, straight to the website. So are there principles or concepts that we should be thinking about to move a consumer forward or, B2B prospect forward? Or is it just about being there, whatever device or channel they happen to be on?
I'll start from a B2B perspective, and I am passionate that brand is absolutely critical, and smart creative that is compelling and relevant is still an absolute to engage a customer. Now, the content that you serve up in a B2B world is important because, we are selling more complex products. It is a bigger decision. You do need to map the customer journey to where they are in a sales funnel, for example, which frankly isn't that much different than the old-fashioned funnel of, awareness to familiarity, consideration, and purchase. But, you've got to start with giving them a reason to even pay attention to you. you and know who you are, because B2B brands aren't necessarily household names all of the time, and we don't necessarily need to be, but we've got to do that step with our targets. And then once you understand that more, maybe you verticalize the message, or maybe you make it geographically specific, whatever B2B industry you're in. But I believe that the thread of continuity behind the brand and creative executions should stay the same, because that's who you stand for, and this is a company who's going to be doing business with you for the long term.
Yeah, it sounds like why that happens is a lot of what's been discussed today is too much is being done in silos, right? So campaigns should work across all the different screen sizes. It's okay to have and to understand what type of ad works best on what screen, but it needs to be done in conjunction with an overall process where the whole I don't even like to use the word campaign, because I agree with you, it's more content and building the relationship, but that the whole thing is thought out from beginning to end, and that's really where that integration across the organization needs to happen.
I'm really glad that you brought this up. As a consumer, I'm kind of irritated by how poor creative is as a digital format. As a business, I go back to the basics. That foundation of measurement didn't exist for most of the past decade in a way that you could count on it. And in fact, just last week, I was working with my team and we were comparing a cookie-based technology on the creative, trying to figure out, is there a difference between like those stupid little banners that I get on my phone versus kind of the native embedded into the app, and we were kind of looking at that. And when you're looking at kind of the old technology, it was really hard to figure out from a measurement standpoint if there was any difference. When we isolated it down to the person, figured out who was exposed and unexposed on native formats where that banner was and was not present, we used the holdout, like tried and true, imagine that, test and control. What you saw was a massive improvement, and on one campaign, it was almost 700% better isolating for all the fancy data that we talked about. The creative was the signal in the whole thing that really changed it. And I think that the shift to the devices, because it's a fundamentally different format, and this born mobile generation expects interaction to be different. I'm really, as a consumer and as a business, hoping that we see a resurgence in attention to creative.
One thing that I've been thinking about a lot is with messaging apps, what the creatives might look there. So speaking from your standpoint at Facebook, you guys have WhatsApp. Yeah. What will that marketing look like, and what will the creative look like in apps that are incredibly personal?
Specific to WhatsApp and the messaging, the short answer is I don't know. We have a stated objective that we're not putting ads in it right now, and I think that we have to learn a lot about how people use that. And I think the key for any app developer, not to shift just to generally to apps, the key to understanding that, again, it just goes back to the person. Understand how it is that your consumer interacts with your app. The reason that they downloaded your app, what's the utility function of that, and how are they interacting with it. What we know from all of this research that's been done on millennials and Gen Z and all the stuff coming out is that they expect personalization, and that it is your job, it is our job as a marketer to create experiences that are relevant for them, or they move on to the next one. So understand that and create native experiences that fit your user experience, and it'll have bigger impact at the end of the day for advertisers, and that'll keep them coming back and funding your content initiatives.
We have time for probably one more question. Okay. You guys sure? This is your chance. Okay. We have two more sessions after this. I'll just end by asking you guys a question which relates to the theme of this conference, the entrepreneurial CMO. I'm curious whether you feel if you feel like you've seen a case study where you've seen a CMO doing something that was extremely entrepreneurial and what that thing was. Just kind of getting specific. You don't have to name names, but what you've been most impressed by. And could we start with you, David?
I'm starting to see some amazing things in creative. And I think that the CMOs who are starting to understand that this is an experience that's got to cross different things. And the one that really pops to head very, very quickly, sorry, I'm a Yankee fan, is what Gatorade did after the retirement of Derek Jeter. And the thing that they put, and it was across lots of different devices, and the format of what it was doing was a little different depending on where you were in that journey and in that experience, and how it kind of portrayed Derek moving through the city. And that really spoke to me as a Yankee fan and as a Derek Jeter fan. And so what they did that was very innovative was they paid attention to how he was going to move through the city and made it unique to the various devices and the places that they put it. And I thought that was outstanding.
Okay. Great example.
Yeah, I'm a Yankee fan. I saw that. I choked up. That was that was very good. Yeah, a different take on it would be, and it's not going to be surprising, but the idea that marketing and technology is really converging. So, to me, the great CMOs, despite the technology, really stick to the basics, stick to the fundamentals, test and learn, reach resonance and reaction, but at the same time, really understand the technology more and more, and are really tight with their CTOs and their CIOs. I just see that interaction continuing to move in that direction. It's absolutely essential. You can't take the two apart anymore.
I would say it goes back to what I said at the beginning about defining what multi-platform means for you, and it being more than just about the screens, but even the different human ways you interact with customers. So again, I have to put my B2B lens on it, but it is, about how a CMO can impact the sales force, literally people, not salesforce.com, but the people who are interacting with customers, as well as bringing customer experience and technology under the CMO's hat, either directly or indirectly. That's a theme I heard a lot today, actually, but I believe it is relevant in so many ways, given a customer-centric environment, an area where customers really are in control. And looking at that from an outside-in perspective related to metrics versus inside-out. So, customer experience when it sits in an ops function can often be an inside-out version versus what does the customer need from me, even if my time to resolution took an extra 3 minutes.